Well, it keeps moving. It always did. It always does.
Richard Wolff has often warned that the United States is eroding its own economic influence.
Which is why the stock market does real well while the economy is hollowed out.
For decades, Washington enjoyed unparalleled dominance in global trade and finance.
For the 10% of our people who own the companies of this country, it was wonderful.
But that position, he argues, is no longer secure.
Here we go, folks. These numbers scream a simple message if you dare listen. If you add up the GDP of the United States and its 6 major allies, the so-called G7, it works out to about 28, 29% of the total output of our planet is accomplished by those 7 countries. We have 195 countries in the world, but those 7 alone do 28% of the world's output. What about China and the BRICS? If you add them all up in the same way, they work out to be producing approximately 34 or 35% of the world's output.
New alliances like BRICS are emerging as credible alternatives, and part of the reason lies in America's over-reliance on tariffs and sanctions.
So please, simply understand, China and the BRICS are a bigger, larger in terms of output, and therefore richer in terms of product than the G7. That's been true since the year 2020, and the gap between them gets larger each year since 2020, including 2024 and 2025, as I speak to you. But more than that, the GDP, if you break it down, will tell us what has happened to the core manufacturing industry at the base of any economy. And that we all know because you can see it. Industry, which was once something that characterized Western Europe.
Instead of strengthening US power, these tools are driving other nations to band together in ways that diminish Washington's leverage.
Only and then moved out of Western Europe, which lost much of its industry because it moved to the United States, to Japan, to other parts of the world. Well, it keeps moving. It always did. It always does. And starting in the 1970s, large industrial corporations in the United States, most of them, discovered that they could make more money, become more profitable by doing 3 things in a big way. Number 1, move production out of the United States to China, India, Brazil, other places. Nobody put up a gun to their head. No one forced them. Not the foreign government, which never had the power, nor the American government.
He notes that tariffs, presented as a way to protect American industries, end up burdening consumers with higher costs and discouraging trade partners from doing business with the US countries.
They demanded the American government help them move abroad, maintain the military all over the world to make it safe to do business at a great distance. But they went and they set up their factories over there and they closed them here. And we all know which parts of America, New England, the Rust Belt, and large of the parts of the rest of the United States sit empty and idle because those companies made more money. If you were a shareholder, you got a piece of the extra profits, which is why the stock market does real well while the economy is hollowed out. The second thing they did was replace workers with machines, automation. And the third thing they did is bring in cheap immigrants. When you can't make more money by going over there where the cheap labor is, you bring it here. That's what they did. And for the 10% of our people who own the companies of this country, it was wonderful.
Frustrated with this approach, find more predictable and less punitive arrangements elsewhere.
We've had a stock market boom where they became rich, but the other 90% didn't. And that's most of you. And where did the industry go? To the BRICS, to China above all else, to India, to Brazil. Not only to the BRICS, but largely to the BRICS. They became the new center. No one did that to us. We did it to ourselves, because that's how capitalism works. You want to celebrate capitalism, you want to give it a free rein, you want it to pursue profits, you believe in it. Well, that's what it did. The gift it gives you, and the gift it keeps on giving, is the center of economics moving to the BRICS.
BRICS nations, in particular, are expanding trade with one another, bypassing the dollar and exploring financial systems that reduce U.S. influence.
Now the politics. The BRICS are where the people of this planet live. If you add up all the populations of all the countries that are members or associates in the BRICS, it's way more than half the people on this planet. The population of the United States is 4.5%. If you add the G7, double it. Be generous, maybe 12%. 12% in the G7, 50 to 60%, if not more, in the BRICS. The two biggest countries on earth, China and India, are meeting in China, working all this out. Politically, it's over. More and more votes in the United Nations are everybody against the United States. It can't even hold on to its own allies half the time in the G7.
What began as a small coalition is quickly becoming a genuine alternative economic bloc. Sanctions, too, play a central role in this shift.
Many votes are the whole world versus the United States and Israel, or the United States and one or two other tiny politically, we are already isolated. It reflects the economic foundation beneath it, but it's politically kind of obvious. The United States chose to fight a war against Russia in Ukraine, to punish Russia for invading Ukraine in order to protect its border from the encroachment of NATO. Whatever you think of that war, Russia is winning. The United States and the Western Europeans have been losing. That's why the line of where the Russians control is now giving at least a third of Ukraine over to the Russians already.
Wolff argues that while they are designed to punish adversaries, they often backfire by accelerating innovation and self-sufficiency in the targeted nations.
And what happened there was a misunderstanding of the BRICS. Why is that? A political disaster like a lost war? Yeah. Here was the mistake. The Americans thought that they could punish the Russians for invading Ukraine by imposing on them massive sanctions, taking billions of money from them that they had stored in Europe, and refusing to buy the oil and gas, which are crucial exports for the Russian economy. One mistake was made. They didn't understand the BRICS. Because here's what Russia did. It said, okay, those sanctions would hurt if we had no way to get around them. Okay, you're not buying our oil and gas would really hurt if we can't find anyone else to sell it to. But they found a way to get around the sanctions, which they've done. I want to talk to you about the war, or the peace, or the war becoming a peace, or the peace becoming a war, depending on which side of the bed Mr. Trump gets out of on any particular day. No, I know we've all been amazed at the up and down, going around this way and that way, but we shouldn't be. What we should be doing is trying to understand the longer range. So I'm going to call this thing War and Peace, Inconvenient Truths. Here's the context of what's going on. Europe used to be the center of the world's activity, at least in its own mind. There was the spectacular Renaissance after 1,000 years of feudalism, what we call the Dark Ages.
In his recent remarks, Wolff dissected what he calls the economic engine behind endless conflicts.
Then the light came in, and Europe took off. It not only rebirthed itself, but it industrialized, the first part of the world to really do that on a massive scale. Started in England and then spread to the whole world. And as part of the explosion of the power and the wealth of Europe, they took over the whole world. They colonized it. They subordinated Asia, Africa, Latin America to the control of the European countries. Little countries like Britain or Belgium or France or Germany took over whole continents in the rest of the world, or at least they did so in their own mind.
The reality, he argues, is far more inconvenient.
But the last 150 years, the ones of our time, have been characterized by an enormous backlash, an enormous refusal to continue the colonial organization of our planet and to replace it with anti-colonialism. One by one, starting with the United States itself, broke away from the old empires, refusing to continue to be subordinated, junior, very junior partners. That's what we've been doing for the last century and a half, ending colonialism, one country after another, until there are almost no colonies left.
He believes wars are rarely about democracy, freedom, or protection.
Now we can begin to see how this is the context for Mr. Herky-Jerky President, War and Peace, one right after the other. One of the only places today where colonialism is alive, where it is growing and trying very hard to spread rather than shrinking and disappearing, is Israel. Israel is a paradigm case of settler colonialism. A bunch of people from Europe decide to settle in an area that isn't in Europe.
They are about profit, about power, about distraction.
The way people settled the United States, or South Africa, or New Zealand, or Australia, and I could go on. Settler colonialism is what it is. And that's what Israel is. So right off the bat, Israel is an attempt to do something against the overwhelming direction of human history for the last century and a half, which is to end colonialism, to give these parts of the world back to the people who were subordinated by the Europeans. And in Israel, that would be the Palestinians. Israel, however, doesn't want that. No surprise there. Israel wants to stay. Israel wants to grow.
Corporations thrive on military contracts. Politicians win elections by stoking fear.
And Israel therefore proceeded to do two crucial things in its history, neither of which it had to do, but it chose to do so. Not everybody agreed, but it was what the majority seemed to want. Number one, decide that to protect itself, its best option was to go military. Terrorize the countries around, bomb, kill the Palestinians when they got in the way, the Lebanese if they did, and so on. The second thing they did was hitch their survival to the biggest, most powerful military in the world, that of the United States.
Meanwhile, working people bear the cost with their taxes, their futures, and too often, their lives.
So that's what we have. We have a project to enhance settler colonialism against the flow of history, and to do so with an emphasis on military activity backed up by the United States. And for many years, half a century, this succeeded. But like all other efforts to sustain this kind of a project, this one reached its limits. It's understandable that the Israelis do what they do in Gaza. It's not moral. It's not decent. It is what it is. But you have to kill everybody to make that kind of plan work.
He focuses first on the sharp increase in defense spending. According to Wolff, this is not about genuine security or protecting citizens. Instead, it's a predictable handout to the military-industrial complex.
That is extremely unequal. You could never dream of a democracy, one person, one vote, if you take 90% of the people and tell them you live on 1/3 of the income we all together produce, and we give the top 10% the other 2/3. That will make the 10% rich, and the rest of us spectators as to how rich they are. Now, please keep that in your mind when I tell you that the only significant economic act that was passed by and through President Trump's first presidential term was the tax cut of 2017, passed in December of that year.
Defense contractors and connected industries stand to gain significantly, while ordinary taxpayers foot the bill.
It gave an enormous tax cut to corporations and the rich, precisely the people who needed it least, precisely the people who had enjoyed a rising share of the wealth of this country being redistributed to them out of our hands, out of our wealth. They didn't need it, but Mr. Trump gave it to them anyway. And that's the secret to why we have a second Mr. Trump presidency, because they were so happy with what he did for them in December of 2017 that they brought him back for another term, and he just delivered the same tax cut to them again.
Wolff views this as a clear example of how public resources are funneled upward, enriching the powerful while masking it under patriotic language.
He extended the one from 2017, and he added a bunch of extra goodies for them. He will, by this bill, which is admitted by the Republicans, those who have half a brain at all, even they understand it, this will make inequality worse, just like his first tax cut for them did. Because we need to go back to really make America great again, would mean to make it as less unequal as it once was, not more unequal as it now is. But Mr. Trump won't tell you that, because he's, as you might have noticed, among the people at the top. And he's loyal to them, not to you necessarily, you who voted him in, but to the people who put him in, and that's different.
Next, Wolff turns to social spending. He acknowledges promises of better roads, schools, and healthcare access.
We are making our society a society of extreme inequality. And history teaches us, if it teaches us anything, that in the long run, as masses of people understand the inequality imposed on them and what it costs them in careers they can't have, in jobs they can't get, in income they can't enjoy, in promotions denied to them, as it becomes clear that that's what an unequal society produces, they will not tolerate it. And then the bad news comes as the people at the top realize that the long-term payoff to taking more than a fair share is you lose it all.
But he quickly points out that many of these programs are financed either through cuts in other vital areas or by piling on national debt.
It's happened over and over again. And to those who think it can't happen here, watch. It is happening here. It's not sustainable what we are doing in this country. The people at the top, the millionaires who dominate in the Senate and the House, are simply feathering their own nest, imagining it will never come back to haunt them, imagining they can just go on and on. And they have been doing it for a long time. I'll give them that. But they're running out. They can't anymore. It's too extreme. We are watching what happens when that crucial moment is arrived at. The Democratic Party is so corrupted by its donors that it offers no significant opposition. In France, twice in recent years, the government tried to do the kind of step towards inequality we're doing here. And both times, the French people did the same thing. Out into the streets they went. Their left-wing political parties, their progressive parties, their anti-capitalist parties led them into the street and said, this country will not go to that level of inequality.
The result, he argues, is short-term relief that leaves deeper structural problems untouched.
And let me remind you, for those who may not know, in France, the law is once you graduate from high school or college and you take a job, the law requires your employer to give you 5 weeks of fully paid vacation every year. You get that? The next time you hear an American politician say, we're the greatest country, remember what I just told you. Likewise in France, and there are other countries like it. I just know France well, so I'm picking my example. You're covered with health insurance from the day you are born to the day you die. Anything that happens to you, the government covers the cost of your medical care.
Future generations will inherit the financial burden, all while political leaders claim victory today.
It's a right you have as a citizen. Doesn't depend on whether you have a job or what job you have or what your employer is or isn't willing to give you as medical coverage. None of that. It's your right, and you get it as a matter of right. I'm a college teacher. In France, colleges are free. That's right, no tuition, no fees. You pay your room and board, but you are not required to pay. So you don't build up a big load of debt to get through school. That's all burdensome because we're not allowing that. We want a society in which the rich pay a big share of their wealth to have a decent society, and not one that's falling apart because they want to keep the lion's share, as I've just told you, of the society's wealth.
Wolff is particularly critical of the budget's tax policies. He describes how generous incentives and subsidies are directed toward tech companies, agriculture, and green energy.
The rest of us, we're supposed to produce the wealth in the factories, the offices, and the stores where we live. But we don't get the wealth we produce. We, the people, get 1/3. And the 10% at the top, the boards of directors of the corporations, those people, they take 2/3. We should have the courage and the determination for ourselves, for our brothers and sisters, and for our children, not to let the growing inequality proposed by Mr. Trump, now rammed true by Mr. Trump, simply to continue. It is taking us in a direction none of us will want to see,